My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 38 years old, and until last year, I thought I understood betrayal. But nothing could prepare me for the day my mother's will was read. In one sentence, my entire future collapsed. Everything goes to your sister, Rebecca. The $28 million diamond collection. The mansion on the hill with 12 bedrooms and a Tesla in every garage. Even the lake house we built with our bare hands as kids. She got it all. Me? Nothing. Not a dollar. Not even a watch to remember my mother by. I sat in that room humiliated, while Rebecca smirked in her designer dress, flashing a Rolex she hadn't even paid for. I thought my story ended there, in silence and shame. But what I didn't know was, the real truth about my family's fortune was waiting inside my grandmother's diary. I never thought silence could feel so loud. The air in that lawyer's office was heavy, almost suffocating as my mother's will was read aloud. I sat in the corner of the mahogany table, palms sweating, heart pounding against my ribs. I was 38 years old, but in that moment, I felt like a powerless child again. The words hit me like bullets. The estate, valued at $28 million in assets, including the primary residence, jewelry collection, and vehicles, shall be transferred to my daughter, Rebecca Carter. That was it. Just like that, my life, the sacrifices, the years of loyalty to my mother were erased. My sister Rebecca got it all. The mansion with 12 bedrooms and marble floors. The diamond necklace was appraised at $28 million alone. The 3 Teslas parked in the circular driveway like toys for the rich. Even the lake house where I had painted the walls with my own hands as a teenager. And me? Nothing. Not a dollar. Not a keepsake. Not even a photograph. Whispers rippled around the room. Family friends exchanged glances, their pity burning into my skin. The lawyer avoided eye contact, shuffling his papers as though the ink itself was ashamed. Rebecca leaned back in her designer dress, crossing her legs with deliberate arrogance. A Rolex glinted on her wrist, my mother's Rolex. She smirked at me, her voice sweet as poison. "Guess you'll always be the broke one, Danny." The room chuckled with her. That laugh, light, airy, dismissive echo in my skull. My fists tightened under the table, nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to demand answers. Instead, I sat frozen, my body numb while my soul burned. All my life, I'd told myself that loyalty mattered. That if I worked hard, kept my head down, and honored my family, it would mean something. But in that moment, as Rebecca accepted her crown in front of the crowd, I realized how wrong I'd been. Blood wasn't thicker than water. It was thinner than air. When the meeting ended, Rebecca strutted past me, her perfume choking me like smoke. She leaned close enough for only me to hear. "Face it, Daniel. Mom never believed in you. This estate was always mine." Her words sliced deeper than any lawyer's decree. I walked out of that office humiliated, crushed under the weight of betrayal. The world outside was still moving, cars honking, people laughing, life going on. But for me, time had stopped. My mother had left me nothing. My sister had taken everything. And for the first time in my life, I questioned if I was worth anything at all. I thought that was the end of my story. But what I didn't know was, Mom had kept more secrets than diamonds. Growing up, it wasn't even a competition. Rebecca was the daughter, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I remember being 12, mowing the lawn in the blistering summer heat, while Rebecca lounged by the pool, sipping lemonade like a queen on her throne. Dad stepped outside, sunglasses on, and instead of noticing me drenched in sweat, he turned to her. "That's my girl," he said, pride thick in his voice. Then he looked at me, irritation curling his lip. "Daniel, be more like your sister." Those words stuck with me like a stain I could never wash out. Rebecca was whisked away to Paris for the summer after high school, to broaden her horizons. I was working double shifts at the diner just to afford gas money for my beat-up Ford. She was sent to a private college with tuition checks that cleared before the ink was dry. I went to community college at night, balancing textbooks on my knees during lunch breaks at my warehouse job. Even at family gatherings, the script never changed. Relatives would fawn over her designer handbags, her study-abroad stories, her polished laugh. Me? I was the guy fixing the grill, setting the table, invisible until something went wrong. Rebecca loved to flaunt it. She'd return from her trips with bags full of clothes and souvenirs, laying them out like trophies. I can still hear her voice. "Danny, you wouldn't understand. Paris is wasted on someone like you." The arrogance dripped off her words. And the worst part, my parents agreed. Their silence was agreement enough. While Rebecca soared, I stayed grounded. Too grounded. I worked jobs, kept the family running in the background, and hoped someone would notice. But, in their eyes, I was just the shadow standing behind her spotlight. Every memory felt like a reminder. Rebecca was adored. I was tolerated. She was built up. I was told to be a man and deal with it. For years, I tried to swallow it, convincing myself that being hardworking and decent would eventually matter. That one day someone would look at me and say, "You're enough, Daniel." But that day never came. Not from my father, not from my mother, not from anyone in that house. Rebecca's crown only grew heavier with diamonds, while my shoulders bent under invisible weight. And when Mom's will was read, it was just the final act in a play I'd been cast in my whole life, the forgotten son, the background character in my sister's perfect story. At least, that's what they believed. But Grandma never saw things the way my parents did. Not everyone in my family worshipped Rebecca. Grandma Eleanor, my mom's mother, saw things differently. She was the only one who looked past the shine of Rebecca's perfect image. Where everyone else saw a princess, Grandma saw a spoiled child. Where they saw me as average, she saw something else. I still remember sitting at her kitchen table when I was 15. The smell of her apple pie filled the room, and the afternoon light made the lace curtains glow golden. She looked at me over her glasses, her eyes sharp but kind. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady, "one day you'll see what people are really worth. And when that day comes, don't stay silent." I shifted uncomfortably in my chair. "What do you mean, Grandma?" She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. For such a small woman, her grip was iron. "Worth isn't measured in trips to Paris, or shiny cars, or who gets praised the loudest. It's measured in truth. And when the truth finally comes out, it won't be Rebecca standing tall. It'll be you." Her words sank into me, heavy and confusing. Back then, I couldn't imagine a world where Rebecca wasn't holding all the cards. She was untouchable. But Grandma believed otherwise, and she never spoke without reason. A week before she passed, she called me into her room. Her voice was weak, but her eyes still burned with that same steel. She handed me a small leather-bound diary, old and worn, its pages yellowed with age. "This is for you," she whispered. "When the time is right, open it. You'll know." I turned it over in my hands, confused. "What's in it?" She gave a faint smile. "Answers, and a reminder that silence is the tool of cowards. You, Daniel, you're no coward." That was the last real conversation we ever had. She died the following week, and in the chaos of the funeral and the years that followed, I buried that diary deep in my closet. Life moved on. Or maybe I just convinced myself it did. But her words never left me. They rattled in the back of my mind every time Rebecca laughed at me, every time Dad told me to be more like my sister, every time I wondered if maybe I really was worthless. Now, sitting there after the will reading, feeling like the rug had been ripped from under me, I realized something. Grandma had seen this coming. She had left me more than comforting words. She had left me a weapon. I just hadn't used it yet. That diary was still buried in my closet, waiting. It didn't take long for Rebecca to turn her inheritance into a spectacle. 2 weeks after the will reading, she threw a party at Mom's estate, a party that looked more like a royal coronation than a family gathering. The chandeliers sparkled so bright they hurt my eyes. Champagne flowed from fountains like liquid gold. Waiters in black vests carried trays of hors d'oeuvres I couldn't even pronounce. Guests floated from room to room, admiring the grand piano in the foyer, the indoor pool, the walls lined with oil paintings worth more than my entire apartment. Rebecca stood in the center of it all, draped in a designer gown, diamond earrings glittering under the lights. She looked every bit the queen of the estate, soaking up the admiration with a smug smile. People clinked glasses to her health, to her bright future, to the woman who had just been handed $28 million and a lifetime of luxury. I stood near the back, trying to be invisible in my off-the-rack suit. My drink sat untouched in my hand, my throat too tight to swallow. The laughter and applause felt like knives slicing into me. Then Rebecca spotted me, and like a predator smelling weakness, she pounced. "Oh, Daniel," she called out, her voice carrying across the room. All eyes turned toward me. "I didn't realize you made it. How brave of you to show up." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd. She smirked, tilting her champagne glass. "Tell me, are you enjoying the estate? I know it must feel different for someone who spends most of his days mowing lawns and scraping by." My face burned. The room tilted as whispers surrounded me. Did she really just say that? Poor Daniel. Rebecca leaned closer, her voice sharp enough for everyone to hear. "Don't take it too hard, brother. This estate isn't for people who mow lawns. Some of us were just destined for better." The guests erupted in cruel chuckles. I wanted the floor to open and swallow me whole. My chest burned with humiliation, my hands trembling so hard I had to set my drink down before I dropped it. For a split second I thought about leaving, about walking out those grand doors and never looking back. I turned toward the exit, each step heavy, my heart pounding with shame and rage. But then it happened. Just as I reached the marble staircase, a hand gripped my arm. Firm, urgent. I spun around, startled. A man I didn't recognize, dressed in a black coat, stood there with piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. His voice was low, steady. "Daniel, your grandmother wanted me to find you." The music and laughter faded into background noise as my stomach dropped. But on my way out, a stranger grabbed my arm and said, "Your grandmother wanted me to find you." The man's grip was steady, not aggressive, but strong enough to keep me from bolting out of that house of humiliation. His eyes were sharp, older, but filled with something I hadn't seen all night: respect. "My name is Mr. Collins," he said, his voice low so only I could hear. "I was your grandmother Eleanor's attorney. She made me promise that when the time was right I'd come find you." I froze. The noise of Rebecca's champagne-soaked party blurred into a dull hum. "Why now?" I managed to whisper. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope, yellowed slightly with age. My grandmother's handwriting leapt off the front instantly, elegant, looping, unmistakable. My throat tightened just seeing it. "This is from her," Collins said, pressing it into my palm. "She told me you'd need it one day. She told me not to give it to anyone else, only you." My fingers trembled as I tore it open. The smell of old paper and ink hit me like a wave of memory. Inside was a single handwritten letter. My eyes devoured the words. "My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, then they've lied to you. Do not believe everything they've told you about what you deserve. The truth has been hidden, locked away where only you can find it. The answers are in my diary. Trust no one but yourself. With love, Grandma Eleanor." My breath caught. I read the words again and again as if I had misread them. Lied to me? The truth in her diary? I looked up at Collins, my voice shaking. She left me a diary years ago. I never opened it. It's still in my closet." He nodded once, solemn. "Then that's where you'll find what she wanted you to know. Don't wait. Don't tell your sister. And Danielle, be careful. Your grandmother believed you were stronger than they ever imagined." Rebecca's laughter rang out behind us, cruel and sharp like glass shattering. Nobody noticed us, nobody cared. It was like two worlds existed in that room, the glittering lies of Rebecca's empire, and the truth, sealed in my grandmother's words, now burning in my pocket. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't even look back. I pushed through the mansion doors, the night air hitting my face like a cold slap. My heart thundered as I sped home. Grandma's letter crumpled tightly in my fist. When I reached my tiny apartment, I tore through the closet, throwing aside boxes and old clothes until my hand brushed against the familiar leather cover. The diary was exactly where I'd left it, dusty, untouched, waiting. I sat down at my desk, the envelope beside me, the diary in my lap. My hands shook as I opened the worn clasp. The moment I opened it, my entire world shifted. The diary smelled faintly of lavender, just like Grandma's living room had when I was a boy. My fingers traced the faded leather cover before I finally opened it, the spine creaking like it hadn't been touched in decades. The first pages were filled with her familiar handwriting, neat and elegant, recounting ordinary days, afternoons in the garden, baking pies, scolding my grandfather for smoking cigars indoors. For a moment it felt almost comforting, like she was speaking to me again. But then, several entries later, the tone shifted. Daniel must know the truth one day. I pray he reads this. My chest tightened as I turned the page. What followed made my blood run cold. Grandma described how Mom had planned everything, how she wanted the estate and assets to be split equally between Rebecca and me. There were even notations of meetings with financial advisors, draft wills, and exact percentages. Both children, she wrote again and again, must be treated fairly. But then the handwriting grew shaky, darker. Grandma's words painted a chilling picture. How Rebecca had started whispering in Mom's ear during her illness, telling her I would waste money, that I was irresponsible. How Rebecca convinced Mom to sign documents when she was too sick to even hold a pen steady. And then came the dagger. Grandma had discovered that the so-called amendments to the will, the ones leaving everything to Rebecca, were not written by Mom at all. She described mismatched signatures, different ink, and even times when Mom had been too heavily medicated to sign anything at all. Rebecca manipulated her when she was weakest. It wasn't inheritance, it was theft. I turned another page, my hands shaking. Detailed lists, written meticulously in Grandma's hand, cataloged what had gone missing. $28,450,000 in appraised diamonds and jewelry. 3 estate properties, valued at nearly $12 million combined. A collection of rare Rolex watches, one of which had belonged to my grandfather. Vault accounts registered under Rebecca's name that hadn't existed before Mom's illness. It was all there, carefully documented like Grandma knew one day I'd need to hold it in my hands as proof. My stomach churned. My sister hadn't just been the golden child. She had stolen everything. Diamonds, estates, and even the story of being Mom's favorite. And I had been left with nothing but silence. I closed the diary, pressing it to my chest, my mind racing. If this were true, and I knew it was, Rebecca hadn't inherited a fortune. She had forged it. And forgery meant fraud. Fraud meant everything she had could be taken back. I looked at the last page I had read. Grandma's words bold and underlined, as if she knew this would be the moment I needed them most. Daniel, the truth will set you free, but only if you are brave enough to fight for it. I clenched the diary tight, fury and hope burning together inside me. If Rebecca forged documents, this wasn't an inheritance fraud. I didn't knock. I stormed straight into Rebecca's marble-lined foyer, clutching Grandma's diary in one hand and the legal documents in the other. The glittering chandelier overhead mocked me, each crystal drop reflecting the fortune that should have been shared, not stolen. Rebecca appeared at the top of the staircase in a silk gown, her glass of champagne catching the light. She smirked, descending like royalty, her voice dripping with venom. Well, well, if it isn't the empty-handed brother. Come to beg, Daniel? I didn't flinch. Instead, I marched to the grand dining table and slammed the diary down, its leather cover echoing like a gavel. Pages spilled open, lined with Grandma's handwriting and Mom's original draft wills. You stole everything, I said, my voice shaking but loud enough to silence the room. Family friends froze, champagne glasses midway to their lips. Cousins whispered, their eyes darting between us. Rebecca laughed, sharp and cruel. You can't prove anything. That's just an old notebook. No one will believe you. But the color drained from her cheeks when I flipped to the entry describing the forged amendments, complete with dates when Mom was bedridden and couldn't possibly sign. Gasps filled the room. An aunt muttered, "Dear God," while another relative whispered, "So he was right all along." I pointed to the notarized drafts, Grandma's meticulous records. This was Mom's true intention, equal inheritance. But you forged, manipulated, and stole. And now everyone knows it. Rebecca's hand trembled around her glass. She tried to sneer, but the mask slipped. Shut up, Daniel. You've always been jealous. No one takes the word of the failure brother. But for the first time, her voice cracked. I met her gaze, steady. This isn't about jealousy. It's about truth. And the truth is written in black and white. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. My relatives stared at Rebecca like they were seeing her for the first time. Not the golden child, but the thief behind the crown. And then, as if on cue, the heavy oak doors swung open. Mr. Collins, Grandma's attorney, walked in, his suit crisp, his leather briefcase in hand. His expression was cold, unflinching. "Actually, Daniel isn't the only one with proof," he said, his voice cutting through the stunned whispers. Rebecca's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble floor. And then Mr. Collins walked in holding something even Rebecca couldn't deny. The room was tense, every eye fixed on Mr. Collins as he set a slim black laptop on the dining table. Rebecca tried to scoff, but her voice cracked. "What now, some dusty paperwork? Nobody cares about old." Her words froze when the screen lit up. The image of Grandma Eleanor filled the room, frail in her final days, but her eyes were sharp, her voice clear. "If you are watching this, my name is Eleanor Whitmore. This testimony is legally binding." Gasps rippled across the crowd. Rebecca's face drained of color. Grandma leaned forward in the video, her gaze unflinching. "My daughter was sick when changes to her will were made." Rebecca pressured her, manipulated her, and forged her hand. "But Daniel is the one I trust. The one who has always lived with honesty and dignity. The estate, the jewels, the true inheritance, it all belongs to him." The room erupted. Aunts and uncles who once praised Rebecca now stared at her in disgust. One cousin muttered, "She really did it." Another shook his head, whispering, "All that money, all lies." Rebecca's lips trembled. This is fake," she shouted. But Collins calmly produced the notarized affidavit verifying the video's authenticity. "Your grandmother ensured this testimony would carry full legal weight," he said. "This isn't just her word. It's the law." The tide shifted instantly. Guests turned their backs on Rebecca, whispers turning sharp. The woman, who had paraded her wealth as a crown, was suddenly exposed as nothing more than a fraud. Daniel, for the first time, didn't feel invisible. He felt seen, validated, loved. Grandma's final words in the video echoed through the hall. "Daniel, never forget, true worth isn't measured in diamonds. It's measured in courage." Rebecca collapsed into her chair, her mask shattered. I stood taller, my fists no longer clenched in rage but steady with resolve. For once, I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the outcast. I was the rightful heir. But just as the weight began to lift from my chest, Collins looked at me with a strange hesitation. He closed the laptop slowly, his expression unreadable. "There's something else," he said, his voice low. "Something Eleanor asked me to tell you, only after the truth about Rebecca was revealed." My pulse quickened. The diary. Grandma's cryptic notes. Was there more? Collins slid a small sealed envelope across the table toward me. "This last secret. It isn't about Rebecca. It's about your father." But the diary held one last secret. About Dad. The courtroom was silent, except for the sharp crack of the judge's gavel. Assets seized. Estate restored. Fraud charges filed. Those words rang like thunder in my ears. Rebecca sat at the defendant's table, pale and trembling. Her designer dress looked cheap under the cold fluorescent lights. The confidence she once carried like armor had melted into panic. The state moved quickly. The 3 Teslas were towed away within days, their glossy paint jobs reflecting flashing police lights instead of champagne flutes. The $28 million diamond collection, her crown jewel, was repossessed and catalogued, locked away as evidence. The estate she flaunted at her lavish party was no longer hers. The title transferred back under my name by court order. But Rebecca wasn't the only one in the spotlight. When Collins presented the diary alongside Grandma's testimony, the court learned my father had known. He hadn't forged the documents, but he turned a blind eye, fully aware of Rebecca's manipulation. He let her scheme because it kept the peace, because it made his perfect daughter happy, even if it destroyed his son. The betrayal stung sharper than any diamond blade. My own father, silent in my defense, complicit in my downfall. The shame in his eyes as the truth was read aloud was the only justice I'd get from him. He wasn't charged, but his reputation collapsed. Family friends cut ties. Neighbors stopped waving. He'd live out his days as the man who let his daughter steal from his son. Rebecca's punishment was harsher. Fraud charges stacked high, her name dragged through headlines. The so-called perfect daughter became a scandal. Friends who once clinked glasses at her parties disappeared overnight. The people who once praised her Paris trips, her Rolexes, her wealth, they scattered, leaving her to face the storm alone. And me? For the first time in my life, I wasn't the shadow. The judge's words restored more than just the fortune. They restored my dignity. The estate was mine now, its wide halls no longer echoing with Rebecca's laughter. The diamonds, valued at $28 million, were secured under my name. The Teslas were returned to the garage, and with them came something more valuable than jewels or cars. Respect. Family members who once whispered that I'd always be the broke one now looked at me differently. Not with pity, not with dismissal, but with acknowledgement. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. And in some ways, I did. But as I stood in that marble-floored courtroom watching Aribi being led away in handcuffs, something unexpected hit me. It wasn't the cars, the estate, or even the diamonds that filled the emptiness I'd carried all my life. It was something else, something I hadn't yet found words for. Because as much as this battle had changed the way people saw me, it was what came after that would change me forever. But the money wasn't what changed me. It was what came after. I used to think my entire life had been decided in that will reading, the moment the lawyer said Rebecca's name and not mine. I thought I had lost everything, my mother's estate, my future, my dignity. But standing here now, after everything we went through, I realized the truth. I never lost everything. I only thought my value was tied to diamonds, mansions, and Teslas. What I actually found was something far more powerful. My worth wasn't in wealth. It was in knowing who I was and refusing to stay silent when others tried to bury me. The $28 million in diamonds? I didn't hoard them. I sold most of them off and used the money to build something bigger than myself. I set up scholarships for kids like me, kids who were always overlooked, who grew up in the shadows of golden siblings. I bought a modest house, nothing like the mansion Rebecca had flaunted, but one filled with peace, laughter, and the kind of love money could never buy. And every night when I sat in my study, I'd take out that leather-bound diary. Grandma's handwriting, shaky but strong, was still there on the first page. Daniel, never stay silent when truth needs a voice. That diary wasn't just proof. It was my compass. It reminded me that even when the world called me worthless, someone believed in me. She saw my value when no one else did. And now, I honor her every day by making sure others know theirs. Rebecca, she lost everything. The Teslas, the diamonds, the mansion, and the friends who only loved her wealth. But maybe, in losing it all, she finally found a mirror. Maybe she'll realize one day that money without integrity is nothing but ash. As for Dad, I don't know if our relationship will ever heal. Betrayal leaves cracks no fortune can mend. But I no longer live for his approval. I live for the future Grandma told me I was worthy of. So I close the diary one last time, run my fingers across its worn leather cover, and whisper, "Thank you, Grandma, for seeing me, for trusting me, for reminding me that I was never nothing." And to you watching this, ask yourself, what would you do if your sister stole your fortune? Would you stay silent? Or would you fight for the truth, even if it meant standing alone? Because the real inheritance isn't money. It's courage. It's dignity. It's knowing your worth when no one else does. For more stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, subscribe now.